Hey, Simon, welcome back.
Yes, hello. How are we?
We are good, and we are recording episode 23, which 23,
23.
23 has the unique property of being the smallest prime number that is not a twin prime. That is a prime number that doesn't
Ah,
have another one within two spaces of it on the number line.
yes, of course. That old piece of knowledge that we're all very aware of. The number 23, the only thing that comes to mind for me is Blink-182 and the lyric, "Nobody likes you when you're 23,"
Was that a reference to like
which
Michael Jordan? Because that was the only thing I could come up with 23 was Michael Jordan.
I think it's actually the line is, "Nobody likes you when you're 23, and you still act like you're in freshman year." So it's less about the age of 23, and it's more about the delta that exists between that age and the level of maturity you would expect from an 18-year-old. But similar to the phrase "great minds think alike," it has been modified over time, and the second part has been dropped. So people just go around in the Blink world saying, "Nobody likes you when you're 23."
Yeah.
So
Or
there you go. Fun facts
Well,
and Michael
you know
Jordan.
what? 23, I like 23,
And me.
because it's also, if you sum the first 9 primes up to 23, that's a perfect square, equals 100,
Oh.
and the sum of the first 23 primes is 874, which is divisible by 23, a property shared by few other numbers. Now,
Jim, where are you going with
now,
this?
now you might be asking yourself, how am I going to segue this into
Yes,
the
I
topic
am. Let's see.
for today's
Let's see this
episode?
Olympic feat.
Well, hold my beer. New,
Okay.
New York's iconic Times Square intersection boasts the world's largest interactive billboard. It spans the entire block that separates 45th and 46th Streets from Broadway and is about 100 meters long and, wait for it, 23 meters tall.
There you
The
go.
number just keeps
Ah,
showing up everywhere.
it does.
Billboards, of course, are just one form of a broader category of advertising called out of home, a format
Mm.
that as digital marketers and analysts we don't typically consider. But when it comes to measuring billboards and other out of home channels, how exactly do we do that? Well, we brought on an expert at the cutting edge of out of home to answer this question and bring light to how out of home is changing in today's digital world. Ty Tinker is the head of analytics at AdQuick, a company that is modernizing the out of home advertising space, bringing billboards back, baby.
Woo.
Welcome to the show, Ty.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jim, and good to see you, Simon.
Yeah. Likewise. Jim, I'm gonna need a few more references to 23. I don't know if
I'm
that build
turning
up
on them
paid
in my
off
head.
in the height of a billboard being 23 meters tall. I was like, oh, there's gonna be some numerology going on or something. But Ty, welcome to the show. We're very excited to have you. And this is an interesting area. This is one that I'll be driving down the freeway and I'll see a billboard out my window, and it'll be like Monday Night Football's on in 25 minutes, and in the back of my head I'm like, are
23
they
minutes.
targeting? Yeah, 23 minutes. Yeah, yeah. Are they targeting me? Do they know that I'm here? How are they even measuring? Do they have tune-in data? So I am incredibly interested to dive into this, especially as we just think about the modern proliferation of these novel surfaces, and we think about what is the future of out of home, and maybe that's even a great place to begin. Although for folks who've never heard of AdQuick, maybe we should hear a little bit about AdQuick and all that you do.
Yeah, there's a couple places we can start here. I think AdQuick is a good one because it is interesting. So AdQuick, you may be familiar with it. AdQuick is a ad tech platform that provides easy access to all of the billboard inventory in the world, and we call it out of home because there's more than just billboards. All sorts of different types of inventory you can access on the platform, all sorts of different stages that you can advertise on all over the world. So AdQuick's objective is to make that easy to plan on, easy to execute, and then easy to measure, which requires a pretty solid base of metadata on all of this inventory all over the world to truly measure. So that's kind of where AdQuick sits in the space. We're connected, we're an omni-channel platform in many ways and try to provide measurement across the board. There's a whole lot that AdQuick does, but the main thing there is just giving you an easy way to look through the inventory. And it's a map-based platform, so you can kind of zoom in, zoom out, see what kind of details and impressions you want to reach, where you want to advertise your brand, all sorts of interesting stuff that you can do with the platform. So that's a brief overview of what we're trying to do and kind of make accessible, which hasn't been done before. Historically, it's been a little bit challenging to set up a billboard campaign. If you think about the traditional way of booking a billboard, really you would hop into a phone book or jump online and find a phone number of some media owner, maybe an Outfront or Lamar, one of those names that you know in your head, but you don't know where it's from. It's
Yeah, it's from the
billboards.
little
You see them
corner
all
in the corner of the billboard that you're just like, what is that?
Yeah.
What is Clear
yeah.
Channel?
Yeah, exactly. You know what it is, but you don't
Yeah.
really know where you know it from. It's the subconscious activity that's happening because of billboards. Anyways, you'd call one of these media owners and say, "Hey, I'm located in Austin, Texas. I'm in Nashville. I really want to advertise my brand on a billboard." And then within a few months, you might have a creative ready to go, and a couple months later, it'd be approved. And then after
Hmm.
6 months, you've got a campaign, right? And that's kind of the old way.
Timely.
Now,
Yeah.
And all of this is like
same media
literally
owners.
like printing out a vinyl. People would actually have to drive out to the billboard, climb up the
Yeah.
ladder, install the
Yeah.
vinyl on like very, yeah, like, you know, very old school, right? Very
Well,
not
I,
Yeah.
non-digital.
yeah. I remember growing up in an era where they had like radio stations would have contests where you would go stand on a billboard. And it would
Heck
like you
yeah.
just stand in front of a billboard for like this radio show, and it'll be like whoever stays up here the longest wins a car. And then you have people up there for like 48 hours, sleep
It's the
deprived.
old Mr. Beast.
On a,
I was
yeah,
thinking the same
exactly.
thing. Yeah. How
Yeah,
long can you hold on to the billboard?
yeah.
Yeah,
It,
exactly. I'm a
it,
climber. I could hang on for a while.
it,
Yeah, you can
is
do
it
a lot,
just
and it's still cool.
yeah?
I mean, it's still being done, and
Hmm.
vinyl wraps are still very much a thing.
Hmm.
They're huge. It's a huge part of the ad spend in the billboard space. The challenge was, and kind of where AdQuick tried to step in, is basically planning and booking that, and across media owners as well, because there's
Hmm.
still a supply chain. Still got to get it
Right.
printed. Still got to have some folks go up and set up the wrap on the billboard.
Hmm.
But when you want to plan something at scale, let's say you wanted to do maybe 4,000 units across the US, and you wanted it to be specific to some audience, and you wanted it to be just outside of every major city in the US, and that crosses over 20 to 50 different media owners. There's no easy way to do that. In fact, it sucks. It was the worst.
Hmm.
That's the reason for the advent of the company. Our founders were from
Hmm.
Instacart, and they tried to do a
Really?
billboard campaign. That was
Okay.
the objective. They were like, "Hey, let's throw up on billboards. Everybody needs Instacart. Everybody can use Instacart. Billboards are, huge, especially within city metros where folks are busy and shoppers need an easy way to, get their groceries." Anyways, they wanted to do a billboard campaign, and it was the worst. So
Mm.
bring in AdQuick. That was the
Yeah.
idea.
So they're like literally calling up dozens of different, what do you call those, brokers or agencies, like the Lamars and the Clear Channels and the media owners, right? And trying to set
Yeah,
up these one-off
exactly.
deals with all of them. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, and not all inventory, I imagine, would be created the same, and they would all have different lifespans. Like, there is so much complexity in this, and I guess maybe a good place to start is to be frank. And sorry, are we just talking billboards? Is it because you mentioned
for
there's
now.
other types of inventory? So just so sort of if you gaze in
There-
your crystal ball, what other kind of inventory are we talking here?
yeah, not just a crystal ball. Other
Yeah.
inventory exists. So there's kind of three major categories that I would, if I were talking to a founder who wanted to
Mhm.
start doing billboards, this is what I would talk about. There's your traditionally booked static inventory, so not digital vinyl wraps. You can think about it that way.
Okay.
Those come in all shapes and sizes. And then you have your digital units that are traditionally booked. So these are 8-second slots on a big digital screen or a small
Okay.
digital screen, but you're guaranteed the inventory for some period of time. So over the course of 1 month, some local diner is going to have their ad rotate for 8 seconds at a time
Hmm.
for a 30-day period, and then you get proof of performance. The third type is definitely one of the kind of sexier, more interesting sides of out of home. That's quickly growing and very interesting. It's programmatic digital. This
Yes.
is kind of a bid system where you can
Hmm.
access inventory, but you don't necessarily know what inventory, or you don't have a guarantee of what inventory you're going to get. You just are
Hmm.
guaranteed a CPM, so a cost per thousand impressions, and then you're also guaranteed some kind of geo-fenced region. And you can also be
Mm.
guaranteed a few other things, such as audiences that you're going to reach. So that's kind of the third category. And we have dedicated resources providing access to this within our platform, and so do all the media owners.
And is it right to say that that third option those are all digital screens too, or are those also like non-digital screens?
Yep.
Okay,
They
yeah,
have to be. They have to be.
yeah.
But they're hooked up into an SSP, so
Mhm.
a supply side platform. So you
Mm.
can go scroll through existing available inventory, but you need a DSP of some sort to start a demand side platform to start
Hmm.
bidding on this inventory. It's interesting. It's not a big portion of the out of home space in terms of dollars, but
Hmm.
it is extremely interesting because it is very attractive to digital marketers and digital
Yeah.
first marketers. My story, I started in marketing in out of home, which is kind of hilarious. I was doing data science and building recommender systems prior, and then I heard about this out of home measurement challenge. And I said, okay, this sounds like the hardest possible thing I could start
Yeah.
working on. Let's get our hands dirty. And so I didn't even know about really digital programmatic and bidding systems prior. I just knew, hey, I'm driving by this billboard. How do I know if it works? That was my big question.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of it's the least, at least coming from my unknown perspective here. It seems to be the least deterministic form of measurement that would be applied here, and perhaps the measurement conversation here is framed up both in terms of, well, when you're talking about the inventory that's available, how is that even being, when you talked before about a guaranteed audience, right? When you're talking about the like geofenced spaces, obviously some of the inventory that you can get, say, on the side of a freeway, and maybe that's really predictable because you have cameras on the freeway that's like, look, we know that 1,000 cars go through here, and I don't know, what is it like, you count cars, you do surveys, what how is this being measured at that point in time to determine the audience, and I guess essentially the quality of the inventory that exists?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's especially tricky when it comes to digital units. So I'm going to give a little bit of insight into how the kind of supply and data works, the data
Mm,
supply works. There's three kind of key data sets that you need. The first data set is billboard inventory. You need a really good idea of exactly where your billboard's located, what
hmm.
direction it's facing. These are the
Yes.
realities. If you're measuring the wrong side of the billboard, you're not going to collect the right audience. So you need the direction it's facing. You need the latitude and the longitude, and then you need a kind of a few other pieces of metadata to really know how the billboard is reaching the audience that's literally standing right in front of it. The next
Mm,
piece that you need is audience data. Audience data comes in kind of many shapes and forms, but really it is linked to anonymized mobile device IDs that are connected to some sort of buying activity. So you have
mm,
like your Amazons, you have your like Experian, you have certain audience providers that have some shared information about people. You also have census data. You have kind of demographics, basically anything that can help define what audiences exist within a certain geo region.
And
These regions
this is
are,
for like even the traditional like the vinyl wrapped billboards too, or is this just
oh yeah.
okay? Interesting.
In fact, it's really interesting for those vinyl wrap billboards because those are always on.
Mhm.
So you kind of have 24-hour access to a specific audience that changes over the course of the day, just like the weather. You have
hmm.
your morning commuters, you have your gym goers, you have your midday lunch people who are, who are going out, venturing out into the real world, the out of home space, to go do whatever activities interest them. And that kind of buying activity is somewhat available, and it's also linked to your kind of digital presence. So there's these audiences. That's a hairy space. It's really complex to start to try and pull these in. Luckily, there's some really great aggregators that kind of take care of that. So we plug into that audience data, and then we connect it to the third piece of data, which is mobile location data. Basically, any anonymized opt-in data that represents whether or not a certain device ID was within the vicinity of a billboard during an ad campaign. So think about, like, I love vinyl wraps because they're so simple compared to
Mm.
the digital space. The vinyl wraps are always on 24/7, and if they're lit, then they're on during the nighttime as well. So we have a pretty good idea, or at least a better idea, of who is in and around these units. Now,
This is
mobile
fascinating.
location
So
data.
even with
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
so I was under the assumption that we only got that sort of like location data from phones for like the more sophisticated, newer digital um, types of out of home. But are you saying for even the vinyl wraps, are there like devices up on the billboard somewhere that's like pinging off of phones for even the old school vinyl wraps?
No,
Wow.
no, it's not quite that creepy.
Mm.
Luckily, you're not being tracked. There's no access to your. There's no connection to. Well, maybe there is, but I haven't
I
heard
say it's
about it.
Right.
creepier
Not.
than that. It's the cell phone companies selling the
Oh,
data.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so it's
Yeah.
oh yeah, cell phone. So the cell phone company is giving that data. Oh
No,
no,
so it's
No.
really
I
it's
could imagine that
primarily
happening, but
opt-in through, like,
okay.
Yeah,
retail
totally.
weather apps. If you're sharing your location, and Apple is very blatant about this, when you get a notification on your phone, it says, "Would you like to share your location?" And then you can manage those kind of preferences. You can opt in to share your location, and that provides access to advertisers to understand whether or not you're within a certain vicinity, shopping at a certain
Mm,
retail store. It's not the best. In fact, it's fairly low opt-in rates, but it's high enough to get a good understanding of what types of audiences are in and around units, right?
well,
You're not going to have, like you mentioned before, there's not this deterministic tracking. It's not even anywhere close to 100% of
mm,
tracking, and that's okay. It's For me, having a data science background, I'm not interested in deterministic tracking because
mm,
not um, that's not necessarily going to help the field move forward and start to explore how to reach audiences without tracking them. And we're
mm,
moving towards a cookieless world. We're putting data privacy first. This is no
Mhm.
surprise, and it's something that's really empowering to consumers. But advertisers still struggle with the challenge of finding who their audience is. So right now is kind of the optimal time to start testing with out of home, because it's a one to many channel. You're going to be reaching hundreds of thousands, if not millions of eyeballs, and you're going to really have a good idea of which audiences responded well and which ones maybe didn't respond as well as you were expecting. So there's experiments that can be set up.
interesting. The real world is complicated and a little bit absurd in some of these scenarios. So while it sounds like we're essentially modeling, right? We're looking at a model of what the potential audience scope is, maybe like the different cohorts throughout the day. But humans change, and you mentioned weather. All of these things influential as to whether folks will be driving by, or maybe I don't know. There's a detour off the freeway, or there's a police chase, and the freeway gets shut down for a couple. Like, are those things that you're taking into account? I guess, are you modeling the likelihood that freeways are getting shut down and that police chases are happening? And if so, like in LA, we have police chases every single day on TV here.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I do see the billboards on TV when I'm watching it, so I'm like, oh, this is now out of home, in home. This is an interesting situation. Which, are you modeling that effect at all, or how are you
Kind of.
thinking about the accuracy here?
Yeah. Well, I love police chases too, and
Yes,
they get so many views on YouTube.
yes,
It's like 10,000 people will be live streaming the LAPD, like, police.
yes,
It's awesome. It's like linear TV all over again.
yes.
It's wonderful, and it's great for billboards.
I'm
Police
imagining
Although,
chases
a
and live
second.
sports is the only things you watch on TV.
I'm imagining a
Sorry, Jim.
secondary business where I hire criminals to lead police chases past particular
There
billboards
you go.
and then sell
heck
that
Yeah.
yeah.
inventory back to the yeah. Okay. Anyway,
Give them
sorry.
a cut of the CPM. I like that.
Right.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, and the more
Criminal
interesting the
assisted CPM.
chase. I remember one police chase. It really sad the way it ended up, but it was a logging truck. It
Mm.
had like giant 50-foot trees on the
Oh,
back of it,
jeez.
and someone had hijacked this truck and was evading the police by whipping the wheel fast enough to where the logs fell off of the back and
Oh, good
blocked the
lord.
road. Terrible kind of ending,
Yeah.
but incredible chase and definitely has a lot of eyeballs. It's just up to brands to decide whether or not they're
Yeah.
interested in being
Yeah.
associated.
It's not the
Well, if you're a
Um,
bail bondsman, that sounds like a great place to be.
yeah, exactly. And that's,
Yeah.
hey, look around. Why there's so many attorneys on billboards? I grew up in Austin, Texas, went to school in San Antonio, Texas. It's some of the highest spenders in those two cities are attorneys because they're right there.
Mm,
I mean, it's proximal. It's like the time to conversion is almost immediate. You want to have, the bail bonds and the certain phone numbers memorized. And so it's really relevant.
sure.
But that's a very short timeline, right? That's a very short time to conversion. There are other strategies, some really interesting strategies,
Yeah.
kind of with billboard advertising. Maybe as fun and experimental as guiding a police chase past your billboards. But what the parallel I think of in my head is right now, a lot of folks are using generative AI to create billboard campaigns that don't actually exist, right?
Mm,
So they're putting up units all over Times Square that they didn't pay for. They are putting themselves onto the Sphere. They didn't actually book the Sphere. It's really
sure.
expensive. Most brands can't afford it or don't want to justify those kinds of costs just to advertise in Vegas. So they'll make it up, and that's fine. Those
Sure.
are additional impressions. What we talk about when we think about the science powering the performance of a billboard campaign is going to be
And sorry,
halo effects.
just so we have clarity on that, we're talking about
Yeah,
faux out of home in the sense of
faux.
if a brand pretends to be in Times Square, they put their image up on one of those. They have an image generator. Their
Yeah.
logo is now up there, and they take a screenshot of that, and then they put that onto Instagram and be like, "Look at us!" And
Yeah.
it's essentially the same creative they would have used. There we go. There. So for anyone
Perfect.
watching on the on YouTube here, you can see the measure up billboard in Piccadilly Circus that Jim and I are in the process of negotiating with AdQuick. So
I
but it's
think you did Jim a little
yeah,
dirty with this copy.
yeah. Well, this is one of the challenges of the sizing and it wasn't a dynamic responsive capture of the image. But sorry, I just wanted to make sure that folks had clarity on what that faux out of home would be
Yeah.
in the sense of using the style of the inventory but not actually buying it. Sorry, and then
Heck
you talk
no.
about the halo effect.
Yeah, so here's what's super interesting is, okay, so you have this faux campaign, you put up a fake billboard, you put it on
Mm,
whatever, certain socials, and you're able to track the metrics that are associated with that. There is
sure.
a halo effect of out-of-home advertising where, if you think about the traditional reasons that someone would book a big brand campaign on billboards across the US, it's really like establishing that your brand is there. You're not there to mess around. You have a presence in this particular city. Your products are available,
Mm,
or products or services are available. There's a lot of these kind of prestige effects that occur with out-of-home. So when folks fake it, which I love, it's super exciting and very kind of expands the bounds of creativity when it comes to out of home, gives some new ideas. When people fake it and then you measure those organic effects, those are actually really comparable to something we measure in the real billboard space when you're actually booking units, which are those halo effects. So
Interesting.
when you place your brand in the mind's eye and have that consistent frequency that's continuing to build the prestige of the brand, you're actually a lot more likely to have a higher conversion rate on your digital channels because of the out of home. So historically, when out of home was measured, or when you use only deterministic tracking, you're missing out on a lot of the effects, not only from lack of, like, let's say, mobile location data or
mm,
direct traffic tracking on your website, you're also missing out on the effects that the out of home channel is having on your other channels, which can be ridiculous. I mean, I was working with a supplements brand who was advertising, and they used programmatic digital bidding systems to advertise within gyms only. That was their only target. They had a very high CPM, but a low budget. So they only targeted gyms. And on
mm,
Google search, we just did a simple kind of Google Trends check. They went from never being searched in the geos where they were advertising to having like 30 to 40% of search share across the US compared to the rest of their markets where they already had a presence. So they had this explosive search growth. And it was like a $8,000 budget. Like, it was for
mm.
out of home. That's, a lot
Yeah.
of media owners will kind of scoff at that, but it's incredible what it can do to your brand. And if you're not measuring the right signals, you're going to miss out. You're not going to notice.
Yeah, if they weren't really thinking about it, they would say, "Oh, wow, we really need to double down on branded paid search." because look how
Yeah.
good it's doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're
And
killing
Yeah.
they would stop their budget from the digital out of home, shift it all into branded search, and then eventually people would stop searching for them and be like, "What happened?"
Why aren't
I
people
mean,
searching
that
for us? Well,
Exactly.
yeah, that's the branded paid search fallacy, right? That's true of when we think about CTV and one of the folks that I this guy Safe, who I've learned a lot from about CTV. His whole perspective on it was TV is coming to us, and it really is the nature of that medium becoming more digital. And so I think maybe billboards are coming to us as well. And I say this as I am a digital marketing practitioner in my day to day. I've never bought a billboard. Maybe one day. But I'm also really bullish on the future
no,
of things like what are the ads in the back of taxis? Is that considered out of
oh
home?
yeah,
Okay, so
oh
I'm
yeah,
really bullish on
that's
the
out of
future of
home.
what I'm calling transient out of home, and that is the captive audience that exists in the back of vehicles, especially self-driving cars, and that being sort of one of the core future monetization vehicles of self-driving cars and what that
Yeah,
means, because I think there's always interesting ideas and so forth that you can utilize in that scenario. But getting back to the crux of this, I think it's really interesting to see Lyft and something, and I imagine there's all kinds of validation that you're doing there. Are you able to do things like incrementality testing in this space? How I'm just trying to think through
oh
the
yeah.
complexities of what that like. How would you run an incrementality test here?
Yeah, we are absolutely jumping into incrementality testing. We're an out of home company kind of first, and then an ad
Mm,
tech company overall. So there's I'll be the first to say there's an inherent bias within our systems when it comes to channel level measurement. So if we're
mm,
comparing to CTV, to direct mail, some other offline channels, to digital, of course, we're inherently going to have some sort of bias towards out of home. So it's better to offload that measurement to partners who can actually take a look at this with a 30,000 foot view. So AdQuick recently announced some partnerships with Keen, with Measured, who are leading the charge when it comes to incrementality testing. So absolutely,
mm.
the challenge with incrementality testing is understanding A, what conversions can be attributed to out of home. That's a tricky one. And B, really the big one is how do you do impressions right with out of home? Like
Yes,
they change
yes,
all the time. If you use predictive models, you're not going to account for the macro factors, the political, the socioeconomic, the police
absolutely.
chases. Like you
Yeah,
you you can't predict that necessarily unless you got a
unless you
great
live in LA,
system.
in which case,
But
if I
what you can
say,
do,
yeah, there'll be a police chase tonight, and
yeah,
80% chance I'm right.
it's Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
It's
uh,
great. Yeah, it's really hard to know what's going to happen in the real world. COVID
hmm
taught us that time and time again. So, what you really need to do is kind of have a strong way to measure just the activity in and around billboard units, and that's pretty straightforward. It comes down to mobile location data. Are you able to see how many devices were within a vicinity of a billboard while your creative was live? It's a really simple kind of solution to the formula, but the formula has a lot of inputs and it requires an extensive access to metadata on the ad or on the billboard space, the out of home space, and understanding of kind of what the view sheds are for particular units, how far away can you see those units, and then, of course, having access to certain mobile location indicators. So knowing where people are, whether or not they're shopping or turning on their mobile location data. It's all opt in. So having access to that is kind of the first step to incrementality testing, which is basically taking a look at how the impressions made an impact on your overall bottom line and turning on and off channels that are associated with certain changes in your kind of bottom funnel metrics. A lot said there. Maybe we can break it down. But yeah, there's quite a lot to unpack there. It's all possible, and it's just plugging the right inputs in.
Yeah, and so you mentioned
Okay.
you've come up with some partnerships with Keen, and you mentioned Measured too, which I didn't see that announcement, but I know we had Greg Dolan on the podcast way back in June of last year, episode 6, with Greg
Yep.
Dolan, the co-founder of Keen, and we just talked with Nick Stoltz of Measured. a
He's
couple
awesome.
episodes back.
Great guy.
So we'll
Yeah.
definitely link those in the show notes if you want people to go back and listen to those. But so
It would have been good, by the way, if that was episode 17 that we'd had Tom, and Billy would have been 17,
Or
oh, I
23.
wonder. No, I don't think it was. Yeah, done.
No, it wasn't.
Um,
It wasn't.
we can make it though. We could rearrange it. But no, I mean, so I guess
There's too
from
much effort involved. Yes, very good.
but from the AdQuick side, so you guys acting as like, we have the data that can be used in a platform like Keen or like a platform like Measured. So you're partnering with them in a way to make that data
Yep.
transition seamless and easy for them.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of I want to make a distinction between the kind of attribution approaches and then what Measured is doing, which is that pure
Mhm.
incrementality testing. Attribution requires user level data. The incrementality testing doesn't. And as we move
Ooh.
towards, as you guys know probably better than anybody, as we move towards a privacy kind of first ecosystem and within this ad tech space where we're all trying to figure out what's next without cookies, incrementality testing is going to be essential. And you can do it with out of home. You can turn it on and off like a light switch, especially with digital ads. I mean,
Mm,
you can do it within a couple of days if you have creatives approved with vendors. So it's like setting up incrementality tests is going to be your first step and a really good foray into figuring out, okay, where does out of home work? When does it work? And then hopefully you unlock the why, which attribution can help with. It can support that,
mm.
but it's not required for incrementality tests.
Yeah.
It would seem though the sort of as we talk about incrementality, the natural question, and Jim is Mr. MMM, as I like to call him, and he's like, call me Jim, and I'm like, Mr. MMM, please. Um, how is this, as more brands are adopting high velocity media mix models? Is this something that are you able to plug this data in? How is this interacting, especially with traditional digital mediums where I don't know, the data velocity and the flow is so high, and the feature categorization that you're able to dive down into and still coarse grained. But how are we thinking about it? Should we be thinking about this differently? And if so, are you working on MMMs right now in terms of essentially thinking about the effect of out of home?
Yeah, a lot of good questions there. I'll kind of address them in reverse order. When it comes to kind of building an internal MMM, it's not really AdQuick's place because we're not kind of the planning and executing side for other digital channels where a lot of
Mm,
brands are spending a lot of their money. So we're not building internal MMMs. We're providing inroads into MMM and incrementality testing partners who
mm,
really their biggest next step with out of home is finding excuse me, is finding the right data to power those MMMs and any kind of form of mixed media modeling. Historically, I'll give a little industry insight here. Impression data, so really the number of eyeballs that are going to be exposed to your campaign and their frequency, it's a modeled figure. And for static, like think vinyl wrap units, it's planned in 4-week increments. So you get the same number for 4 weeks.
And if
And
you're,
if you want to do Go
yeah, I was
ahead.
going to say, and if
You're probably one step ahead.
no, I was just going to say, if you're trying to build if you're trying to incorporate that into a model, you ask whatever agency was in charge of booking that out of home uh, billboard or whatever it was, and asking for the data about the impressions, and they send you a PDF with location, monthly, estimated impressions, that model number you're talking
mhm,
about, and then
Oh,
you
yeah.
get to have an intern go through and do data entry into a spreadsheet, and then you have to figure out, well, my model is a weekly model, and I have monthly numbers. Do I just spread them evenly or what? So yeah, I mean, I for
What
one,
does the intern do?
I
What like, let's think on behalf of the intern here.
yeah,
yes.
What do? Like, they divide by 4. That's the only thing you can
right.
do until you start to, involve some other parameters, or you just find another metric. And for MMM, I'm not, the primary kind of, currency of the out-of-home space is impressions, just like any other, kind of platform. So you book using
Alrighty,
impressions,
folks.
and
If
you
you're
book in 4
listening,
week increments for
no
the
one's
most
listening
part
live,
for
but if you're listening to
traditional
this,
static
we are having
units.
a
There's a lot of
technical.
flexibility on the digital side and programmatic side.
Oh, Ty, I'm not sure if that recorded or if anyone heard you. Jim and I both had a moment of your screen froze, and we can probably cut this a little bit out. But if you want to go back to the start of that section, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. How far back? And I'm going to hide video here, so.
Yeah, what was
Can
it?
you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yep. I'm trying to think how far back.
Okay.
So it was
If you can
the,
rewind like a minute in your head, I'd say. I don't know
Okay.
I
All
forget
right.
what the word was.
Record
I was more
scratch.
tuned into,
oh,
hey, this isn't working.
I had just finished talking about how I hated entering PDFs into, and the interns
Yeah.
divide by 4 and what are they supposed to do,
Yeah.
and go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you said,
What
give
are
me a
the
bit of
interns
metric.
supposed to do? Yeah, exactly. All right, here we go with the interns. What are the interns supposed to do? Right? Like they've received a proof of performance from a Billboard media owner, and it says you got 20 million impressions for 4 weeks or whatever. The only thing that they can do is divide by 4. So you have to start thinking as an MMM company doing weekly or daily level granularity, proving the performance and impact of a channel. You have to think about better ways to approach that incrementality testing framework. Because if you have the same number for every week of a campaign, for a 1-month campaign, that there's no information gain. And this is obvious to anyone who's worked on MMM. There's nothing that it doesn't even matter that it says 20 million. It could say 1 billion. But if there's no change, then you can't measure the impact of that change. It's just like a wave. Like how is the wave going to roll up on the beach if it's just a flat, whatever, silly metaphor, but I think the point's getting across. So you need better data, and the way that you access this data is slightly nuanced, but really kind of depends on the reality of what's happening in and around your units, which comes back to focusing in on impression data at the daily granularity. And this can be predicted, but it can also be retroactively gathered via opt-in mobile location data, via kind of trends that are being measured by location companies. Like there's various methods to access this higher quality data or higher granularity data that's going to give you higher quality insights, especially out of an MMM, incrementality testing, etc.
Okay. I'm just trying to process I don't know, the spongy bit here is just how accurate is that? If it's all modeled and I don't want to say made up and the points don't matter, a la Drew Carey, but it's one of those. How are you calibrating that? How do you have certainty in the volatility?
Mm-hmm. Well, you can always be certain of volatility.
Sure,
That's
of course.
kind of the police chase allegory,
Indeed.
and it's certainly factored in. I think what's interesting here is mobile location data is directly connected to the humans that control the devices that are moving in and around certain units. The hardest factors, and just putting these, being very transparent and sharing kind of the challenges with out-of-home measurement, is 3-dimensional measurement is incredibly difficult. So if you are, let's say, putting up a billboard in Times Square, it's going to be pretty difficult to account for people passing, let's say, through the building that's underneath the billboard itself.
Right.
So there's no guarantee that they saw it. However, those people had to access that certain geo area, that geo-fenced area somehow. We have 2-dimensional measurement. We don't really have 3-dimensional measurement. So as they approach the billboard, there's a likelihood that they saw it. And if 1,000 people kind of approach that billboard on a certain side, right? We include directionality one day on Monday, and then 10,000 people on Tuesday, and then 100,000 people on Wednesday. That change over time is going to be reflected in the behaviors of the individuals who are exposed to the ad. Now, Times Square is all digital, so we're also factoring in exactly when your ad was live, the timestamps, the 8 seconds that your ad was live. So that gets factored in to improve the accuracy as well. And then devices that are moving at 100 miles an hour are filtered out. There's certain kind of quality indicators that are factored in to improve the quality of that mobile location data. But all of this
Mm.
gets fed into a model, and then you study the response metrics that are associated with the time period that the ads were live. This is the other big caveat that is missed in out-of-home incrementality measurement. Not necessarily incrementality testing, but any incrementality measurement. Out-of-home has a slow time to conversion. There's no way necessarily around this. If you're a supplement company running ads in gyms, or if you're an attorney selling bail bonds to criminal GTA drivers, it's going to be a lot shorter. But in
Sure. There's a
general, if you're a
decision of the
D2C
duress.
brand
Yeah.
or a yeah, and you aren't looking at your phone while you're driving, or you aren't,
Sure.
kind of doing shopping while you're walking by an ad necessarily. So there's a longer time to conversion. So marketing analysts and modelers need to account for this window and extend their time to conversion in that period past the end of the campaign. So when your billboards are taken down, people are still thinking of your brand because you were on a billboard,
Sure.
right? Like there is still that kind of extended ad recall, and it needs to be factored in. So that's the other kind of caveat that's sometimes missed. It's like, oh, we took the ads down, it's over, it's all
Hmm.
over. It's like, well, no, not really. You accessed a million people, a million different eyeballs, and you made this really strong impression. There's this memorable creative. It was a real life experience that they had. Give them a second to start shopping, like
Sure.
extend that
Yeah.
time to conversion past your digital channels.
Yeah, I guess that,
So,
that's the inherent challenge though with the digital channels, even themselves when brands, they're running top of the funnel campaigns, and we talk about the latency, or the post impression efficacy, as a key component of what brands need to be considering, and really how long that shift is. And actually, one of the things I was interested in there is, are you doing surveys when you're talking about the associated lift? And I put this out there as an avid Google Surveys user. Not I think I've made. Honestly, I think I've made like $180 off of Google Surveys over the years, where I have. It's amazing. It's Google Consumer Rewards. It's ridiculous, but I love it because what I'm looking at more than anything is the accuracy to which they believe I was either exposed to an ad or to which I was exposed to a specific geolocation, especially in multi-tenancy buildings like malls. And they always ask, "Did you go to Starbucks?" And I'm like, "Get off my back, Google. Yes, I went to Starbucks."
yeah.
It's I'm in a 12 step for it, but still, it's one of those moments that I look at and go, "Oh, this is really interesting." Like, they thought I went to a tire store, but actually I was at the CVS beside it. That's really interesting. And I'm wondering if you have any kind of calibration
Yeah,
like that as well.
absolutely. Okay, brand lift surveys are a critical component of
Mm,
running billboard ads, and I'd say strip everything else away. Brand lift surveys are going to give you some of the best insight you can get onto creative performance and how resonant it was with a specific audience, really
mm,
demographic audience. So, sending out surveys to individuals who are within the vicinity of an ad campaign while it was live. There's multiple ways to source this data. And then once the surveys have been deployed, trying to understand whether or not they remember seeing the ad, even though they were, or if they were nearby, if they were nearby, and then separating them from the control group who was near the billboard but does not remember seeing the ad. That's the control.
mm,
They have very similar demographics and psychographics. The key distinction and that boundary there is going to be whether or not they remember seeing the ad. And this sets up a great way to actually assess incrementality from your campaign. Not just, 50% of people remember seeing my ad. Great. What does that do for me? It's of the
yeah.
people who recall seeing the ad, which ones are likely to visit the website? Which ones are likely to share this brand with their friends? Those kinds of questions can be assessed. And then you say, all right, let's test
Mm.
this in two different cities with like match these markets and study whether or not the incrementality was different between two different creatives and see if that had an effect. What's driving performance here?
And the thing that I like about this is that, you know, Simon, I know we've kind of fit the same mold. We got into marketing through the digital lane, right? Like we did not go
Hmm.
through like traditional marketing courses in university. We kind of like got thrown in and like, oh, we're digital marketers. And so I feel like digital marketers have been spoiled with the amount of data that we've had. And now what I see happening, and not just in out of home, but same thing with linear TV. Now we have CTV and radio. Well, now we have, Spotify, and like these sort
Hmm.
of traditional old school offline channels are starting to be um, integrated in a digital way that gives us a little bit more data so that we can start to think about doing things like incrementality testing with billboards, which, if you thought about this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, would be the realm of the Coca-Colas of the world that have just
Exactly.
gobs of money, gobs of billboards everywhere, and they can afford to do like a one city on, one city off kind of thing.
Yep.
But now this is becoming a little bit more, I hate to use this term, but democratized, right? It's more accessible, I
Mm.
should say, to not necessarily the Fortune 100 brands out there. Mic
Yeah.
drop.
Huge. Huge. Say it again. Yeah. It's
No, I do think we have a slight delay on the audio. I don't know if that is. Maybe we'll fix it in post. Maybe folks will hear it and they'll go, "Why are they all talking over each other?" And that is the magic of podcasts, folks.
Yes, it is.
Indeed.
yeah.
Sorry, Ty. As you were saying.
No worries. Yeah, I think it's super interesting. Maybe democratized isn't the right word, but it doesn't. It's definitely along the right track where you have access to this ecosystem of tools that makes it really easy for you to start playing in this ad space. It's not terrifying. It's not ridiculously expensive, especially when you consider the CPMS that you're getting. They're incredibly competitive.
Mm,
There is value to scaling up your campaigns, but you can run an experiment and do a test and then come back with results that are really, really easy to scale. I mean, you can quickly match all of the same kind of features of a certain billboard, creative, size, audience that you're reaching, market that you have a presence in, and you can duplicate those kind of success metrics across multiple geos.
Yeah, and this is a thing I know when we were talking earlier about it's not just being able to measure, but it's also being able to target, right? Which I don't know what the capabilities used to be 20 years ago with billboards, but I
Mhm.
imagine you probably couldn't target in a way that you can now, right? When you're acting more like a DSP, where you're saying, I want to reach this audience with, this monthly income and this whatever, other demographics and things like that, right? Like that feels like something that um, historically probably wasn't possible, but now we're starting to kind of get to that point as well.
Yeah, there's kind of two sides to this. The first is targeting is available. It's making sure that your placements are in a vicinity of somebody that you want to reach, so you can leverage audiences to take care of that. You can do first party or third party audience targeting, which is incredibly powerful. The other side is with out of home, you're reaching one to many, so inherently you're going to reach audiences that aren't necessarily who your intended audience is. This normally to marketers is like, well, I know exactly who I want to reach. But when you're experimenting with a channel, the only way to actually understand whether or not you're achieving incrementality and whether or not your target audience is responding as expected is to actually have some sort of a control established. There's a lot of discovery that occurs with out of home. We're working with a major e-commerce brand right now who's exploring audiences and trying to figure out, okay, we know our audience pretty well, but we're expanding into some new kind of business units. We're offering some services that you may not associate with this brand immediately. So we actually are in a discovery phase where we have a good idea of who would benefit from these products, but we want to learn more. And you can do that with out of home, where you run an experiment at enough scale to reach a large enough audience to where you can study the response from the individuals who are associated with certain audiences and behaving in a certain way, maybe through their accessing your sign-up forms or site visits or kind of other simple metrics. You can also study your revenue metrics down the line and see, okay, are they responding with their wallet? Are they driving new revenue? So there's a lot to unpack, and it starts by kind of going broad, going a little bit broader, and looking for some of the insights you can gain from reaching audiences that you didn't expect.
Yeah. I know I could keep talking about billboards, especially 23-meter tall billboards all day, but we are sadly reaching the end of our hour here. And Ty, one thing we like to end the podcast with is a takeaway, something that marketers and analysts listening can do immediately after listening to the show. It might be a recommendation for them for a specific book or article or another podcast or newsletter, a tool or something that they can take action on right away. Is there something that you have that you would be able to share with our dear listeners?
Yeah. Man, we covered so much ground today. Thanks for the great and insightful questions and thoughts. I think one exciting thing that you can experiment with is involve your creative team and go generate a billboard. Maybe Simon, you can provide the tools that you used to do this, but go use some generative AI and experiment with what your billboard would look like over Piccadilly Square and Times Square on the Sphere. Play around with it, explore what your brand can look like when it's out in the real world. And then the other thing I encourage marketers to do is continue to look at some of the audiences that they're targeting on the digital side, and check out if they're available in out of home. You can do this with AdQuick, but you can kind of parallel your targeting efforts on AdQuick as well. So I would encourage that kind of exploration. There are kind of endless bounds with out of home. There's a lot of exciting sides to this. There's some really interesting hacks you can do to access your target audience. I talked about the supplement brand accessing their gym going audience. There's units within gyms. There's all sorts of fun stuff that you can play around with. So yeah, go experiment. It's fun.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well,
Hold on,
sorry,
Simon.
Jim,
I
yeah,
want to tag on to the incremental insight and add additional
please.
incrementality here. And second, AdQuick has a bunch of really cool calculators on their site. There's a billboard cost calculator and an out-of-home planner that are just free tools to use, really fun to play with. You can see on the map like where the units are and things like that. And
Yep.
if you're listening to this podcast and you've made it all the way to this point, chances are you probably like podcasts or you just really like Simon and my voice.
Yeah, or you've
But
fallen asleep. Yes,
or,
but carry on. Yes.
that's
Often,
possible
I
too.
think, yeah, yeah, indeed.
Or yeah,
Dreaming about billboards.
but
That's what's going on.
yes, ooh, that would be a weird dream. But
It would.
if you do like really cool marketing data related podcast, AdQuick has a podcast, the AdQuick Madvertising podcast. I'm a big fan of it. I like to listen to it. Has some really good stuff. It is not, it's not like a advertisement for AdQuick. It's actually just a really good podcast. So definitely go check that out. We'll have links in the show notes. Simon, you were gonna say
I
something, I
was
believe.
I was going to jump in with the classic concluding moment, and I think when you're working in a marketing organization, you can often feel like we've really tapped out of all of these digital measurable channels, and you'll be sitting there and you'll have all these 23 bubbles, more, if even, so many options, and someone will come in the room and say, what if we try it out of home? I think it's measurable. I think there's a way that we can approach this. And you can say, yeah, I'll take on that challenge because I think it's time to measure up.